I've always liked school. The kids, the playground, math, PE, science. I loved everything. Everything but reading. I've never been a very fast reader, and for many years, that small fact made me feel totally inferior to all of the other students in my class. During reading groups, I was always with the slow kids or at the slow table, and I could never figure out why. I read just fine, as long as I didn't have to read out loud. But whenever I was asked to read out loud, I stuttered. The idea terrified me. What if the other kids laughed at me? If I read out loud, then the other kids would know that I was stupid too. As bad as reading out loud in the classroom was, the worst part was when we were tested on our reading speeds. I can remember other kids coming back into the classroom after being tested and bragging about how much they had improved since the month before. I was never one of these kids, and it seemed like I was never going to improve. When my name was called to go out into the hall, my heart would drop, my palms would get all sweaty, and I would instantly become sick to my stomach. Unfortunately, faking sick, or actually being sick, got me out of nothing. I dreaded the sight of the two small desks in the hall and the black-haired lady that sat there. When the test began, I would find myself worrying more about the timer than the words in front of me. Every time I stumbled over a word or paused in the wrong place, the aide's pencil would make a hash mark on the paper, lowering my pitiful score even more. As I got older, it didn't get any better, and my ways to avoid reading out loud in class became much cleverer. However, most of them ended up with notes being sent home and me being in trouble. After the first note was sent home, I knew that my schemes to avoid reading would have to become much more elaborate. When I was in 5th grade, my class would have a group reading session every afternoon. My teacher had a cup with popsicle sticks that had our names on them. I would sit close enough to Mr. Jenkins that I could see the names, or at least the number of letters on the sticks, and I knew that if there were only 3 letters, I would be the next one called. I discovered that if I would periodically drop my book and lose my place during the group reading, that I wouldn't get called on. The next year, my 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Erickson, noticed that I was struggling to read out loud, so she gave me yet another test. I didn't know what it was for, but when my mom was called in to discuss results, I feared the worst. There had to be something wrong with me. She was going to tell my mom just how stupid I was. But she didn't. Mrs. Erickson told me and my mom that my reading level and comprehension had tested at a college level. That year, I scored 100% on the PAWS exam. Turned out, I was a lot more capable than I thought. My teacher knew that, and now I did too. Not long after that, I read this scripture. And if men come unto me, I will show unto them their weakness. I give unto men weakness, that they may be humble. And my grace is sufficient for all men that humble themselves before me. For if they humble themselves before me, and have faith in me, I will make weak things become strong unto them. I realized then that if I ever wanted to be able to read out loud, I would have to make myself practice. I was the one who was responsible to make myself better. So I started volunteering to read out loud. Eventually I got more comfortable with it and realized that if I was the one who was making me do it, then it really wasn't as terrifying as I thought it was. As a student and as a future teacher, I know that I will have students that will pass through my class who will struggle in one class or another. I know that I will have students who will do anything to get out of an assignment, not because they're lazy or incapable, but because just like me, they struggle, and they do not understand a certain assignment or a certain aspect of a certain subject. Albert Einstein said, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. I finally realized that I wasn't stupid. I was simply another form of smart. I expect that my students will make jokes or clever remarks to get out of doing a task, because sometimes it's a lot easier to make a joke about something than to admit a weakness. Because of this experience, I will be able to empathize with my students who experience the same thing, those who struggle with reading or any aspect of their education. It is crucial for my students to know that they are not stupid. They are simply a different kind of genius.